The date is January 15th, 2026. For exactly 8 months, a heavy, suffocating silence has hung over the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan. To the public, the trail had gone cold. The vibrant, hopeful energy of the initial search had faded into the grim reality of a cold case. But behind the reinforced doors of the provincial court in Pictou, Nova Scotia, a legal battle was being waged by media organizations. They were fighting to see what the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP, had been doing while the world thought they were standing still. When those documents were finally unsealed, the revelations didn't just provide updates. They sent a shockwave through the province. What the public saw for the first time were 12 search warrants, executed with surgical precision between May 16th and July 16th, 2025. These weren't just administrative papers. They were a roadmap of a shadow investigation that moved with strategic intensity no one outside the major crime unit realized was happening. While the community was lighting candles and peering into the thick brush of Gairloch Road, investigators were already looking far beyond the woods. They were digging into cell phone towers, scouring bank statements, and analyzing highway surveillance. This wasn't just a search for 2 lost children. It was a methodical reconstruction of a family's life, built on the suspicion that the story the public had been told wasn't the whole truth. To understand the weight of these unsealed documents, we have to go back to the beginning, to May 2nd, 2025. It was a Friday morning in Lansdowne Station, a rural stretch of Pictou County, where the woods are dense and the houses are few. Lilly Sullivan and her younger brother Jack lived there in a mobile home on Gairloch Road. They lived with their mother, Malehya Brooks Murray, and her partner, Daniel Martell. At 10:01 a.m., the silence of that rural morning was shattered by a 911 call. The report was every parent's worst nightmare. The children were gone. According to the adults in the home, the children had simply wandered away from the property while the adults were asleep. The response was immediate and massive. This wasn't just a local search. It was one of the most intensive missing persons investigations in the history of Nova Scotia. Within hours, the quiet woods of Lansdowne Station were crawling with over 160 searchers. The air was filled with the rhythmic thrum of helicopters and the buzzing of high-tech drones equipped with thermal imaging. On the ground, teams moved in grid patterns through 8.5 kilometers of heavily wooded, unforgiving terrain. Cadaver dogs were brought in, sniffing through the undergrowth for any sign of the siblings. For 6 days, the province held its breath. But as the sun set on the 6th day, the search was scaled back. No clothing, no footprints, no trace of Lilly or Jack had been found in the woods. To the casual observer, it looked like the RCMP was giving up. The narrative in the media shifted toward the tragic possibility of the children being lost to the elements. But the unsealed warrants tell us that as the ground teams were packing up, the major crime unit was just getting started. They weren't looking at the trees anymore. They were looking at the people. They were asking why there was no independent verification of the children's location after 2:25 p.m. on May 1st, nearly 20 hours before the 911 call was placed. The discrepancy between the public wandered off theory and the private investigative direction is jarring. The RCMP began filing for these warrants just 14 days after the disappearance. They weren't waiting for a miracle. They were building a case. They were looking at the cell phone records of Malehya Brooks Murray and Daniel Martell. They were looking for inconsistencies in the timeline. Why were the children home from school on May 1st? Malehya said Lilly had a cough, but investigators wanted proof. This was the start of a methodical process to verify every single word spoken by the adults in that home. The unsealed documents show an investigation that was skeptical from the start, moving quickly and strategically to ensure that if a crime had been committed, the evidence wouldn't have time to disappear. The transition from a search and rescue operation to a major crime investigation is often invisible to the public, and in the case of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, that invisibility was maintained by the power of the law. To understand how the RCMP operated in total silence for 8 months, we have to look at the legal framework they utilized, the Missing Persons Act. In Canada, this act provides investigators with a unique set of tools. Unlike a criminal search warrant, which requires reasonable grounds to believe a crime has been committed, the Missing Persons Act has a lower threshold. It allows police to access private records, cell phones, bank accounts, and surveillance, if they can show a judge that the information might help locate a missing person. Between May 16th and July 16th, 2025, the RCMP Major Crime Unit approached the provincial court in Pictou 12 separate times. Each time, they presented an affidavit, a sworn statement from an investigator outlining exactly what they knew and why they needed access to specific private data. And each time, at the request of the RCMP, a judge agreed to seal those documents. The justification was clear. Revealing the direction of the investigation could compromise its integrity if someone had taken the children or if foul play was involved. Knowing exactly what the police were looking at would give a suspect a chance to destroy evidence or flee. So, for 244 days, the contents of these 12 warrants remained a secret, known only to a handful of investigators and a judge. The first category of these warrants focus on the digital lives of the two adults in the Sullivan home, Malehya Brooks Murray and Daniel Martell. In the modern age, our phones are the ultimate witnesses. They track our movements through GPS and cell tower pings. They record our thoughts through search histories. And they archive our social connections through call logs and text messages. The RCMP didn't just want to know who Malehya and Daniel were talking to after the children vanished. They wanted to know what was happening before the 911 call. They sought every incoming and outgoing communication, every internet search, and every location data point. Why was this so critical? Because of a statement made by RCMP Corporal Charlene Curl that has now become the cornerstone of the case. She revealed that the last time Jack and Lilly's location was independently verified was May 1st at 2:25 p.m. They were seen on a Dollarama surveillance video. From that moment until the 10:01 a.m. 911 call the next day, there's a 20-hour gap where the only people who claim to have seen the children are Malehya and Daniel. The cell phone warrants were a direct attempt to fill that gap. If Daniel's phone pinged a tower miles away from the home during the night, or if Malehya was searching for how to report a missing child hours before she actually called 911, the wandered-off theory would collapse. The warrants revealed that the RCMP was not taking the family's timeline at face value. They were cross-referencing the cell data against the statements provided in interviews. This is standard procedure in a major crime investigation, but the speed at which they moved, filing the first warrant only 2 weeks into the case, indicates a high level of suspicion. They weren't just looking for the children. They were looking for a reason to change the status of the case from missing persons to homicide or abduction. Furthermore, the warrants extended into the financial lives of the household. The RCMP sought bank records for both adults. In an investigation of this nature, financial records are often used to identify pre-offense behavior. Investigators look for large cash withdrawals that could suggest a plan to flee or hide, or the purchase of specific items, cleaning supplies, tools, or even extra fuel that might be relevant to a crime scene or the disposal of evidence. By examining the bank records within the first 2 months, the RCMP was looking for a pattern of behavior that didn't fit the profile of a normal, tragic accident. They were looking for the financial fingerprints of a cover-up. The unsealed documents don't tell us what they found, but the fact that they asked tells us everything about where their heads were at. They were building a comprehensive profile of the household's activities, leaving no stone unturned in their quest to find out what really happened after that final sighting at the Dollarama. One of the most startling revelations to emerge from the unsealed documents involves a strategic shift that occurred almost immediately behind the scenes, yet was never breathed to the public. While the physical search was concentrated on the thick, tangled brush of Pictou County, the RCMP's Major Crime Unit was already looking at the exits. They weren't just searching the woods. They were searching the borders. Among the 12 warrants, there is one that stands out for its sheer geographic ambition. A request for highway surveillance footage of drivers leaving the province of Nova Scotia. This wasn't a broad, fishing expedition. It was a targeted, 3-day window ranging from May 1st to May 3rd, 2025. This request tells a story of an investigation that, within just a few weeks, had already entertained the possibility that Lilly and Jack Sullivan were no longer in province. Think about the implications of that request. If the official narrative, the one being shared with the heartbroken community, was that 2 small children had wandered away while their parents slept, then highway surveillance at the provincial border makes zero sense. A 5-year-old and a 3-year-old do not wander from their front yard in Lansdowne Station and somehow end up crossing the New Brunswick border hundreds of kilometers away. By seeking this footage, the RCMP was essentially admitting that they were investigating an abduction or a clandestine removal of the children. They were looking for specific vehicles that might have been used to transport Lilly and Jack away from the search area before the 911 call was even placed or in the chaotic hours that followed. The timing of the surveillance window, starting on May 1st, is the most telling detail. As we know, May 1st at 2:25 p.m. was the last time the children were seen by anyone outside their immediate family at the Dollarama. If the investigators believed the children were safe at home that night, why would they need highway footage from the first? The answer is as chilling as it is logical. They couldn't be sure the children ever made it back to Gairloch Road, or if they did, how long they stayed there. By casting a net over provincial highways, the RCMP were preparing for the worst-case scenario, that the children had been moved strategically and swiftly. They were looking for any vehicle associated with the family, or perhaps vehicles belonging to associates that haven't been named publicly, moving toward the border during those critical 72 hours. This brings us to the second vital piece of a movement puzzle, the school bus surveillance. The unsealed warrants reveal that investigators went to great lengths to secure video footage from school buses that traveled the routes near the Sullivan home. At first glance, this might seem like standard procedure, but the context adds a layer of deep suspicion. Lilly and Jack were absent from school on both May 1st and May 2nd. Malehya Brooks Murray told investigators the children stayed home because Lilly had a cough. In a missing persons case involving children, staying home from school is often a red flag for investigators. It provides a gray window, a period of time where the children are expected to be somewhere, but their absence is explained away by a primary caregiver, meaning they aren't missed by the outside world for much longer. The RCMP wasn't just looking for the children on those bus cameras. They were looking for the absence of the children. They wanted to see if the bus stopped, if anyone was visible in the yard, or if there were any other vehicles present at the home during the hours the children were supposedly inside with a cough. They were looking for independent witnesses in the form of digital recordings. In rural Nova Scotia, school bus drivers are often the most consistent observers of a neighborhood's daily rhythm. By seizing this footage, the major crime unit was trying to see if the quiet on Gairloch Road on the morning of May 1st and May 2nd matched the story they were being told. They were searching for a ghost, any visual proof that the children were alive, and well after they left that Dollarama. The meticulous nature of these warrants shows a police force that was playing a high-stakes game of verify and cross-check. Every movement mentioned by the parents in their initial statements was being tested against the cold, hard data of highway sensors and bus cameras. They were building a digital fence around the property. If the children weren't in the woods, they had to be somewhere. If they were moved by car, there would be a record. If they were never at the house to begin with on the morning of May 2nd, the school bus footage might prove the yard was empty when it should have been occupied. The RCMP was looking for the moment the wandered-off story diverged from reality. They were looking for the gap between what was said and what was recorded, and they were doing it with a geographic scope that covered the entire province. When we look at the sheer volume of information the RCMP has gathered in this case, the scope of the investigation into Lilly and Jack Sullivan becomes almost overwhelming. It is easy to get lost in the emotional tragedy of two missing children, but behind the scenes, this is a massive data processing operation. According to the unsealed documents and subsequent statements from the major crime unit, this case has generated a staggering amount of evidence. We aren't just talking about the 12 search warrants. We are talking about a mountain of digital and physical records that would take a dedicated team months, if not years, to fully analyze. To put into perspective, consider the numbers. Over 1,030 tips from the public have been logged and followed up on. Every one of those tips represents a phone call, an email, or a visit from someone who thought they saw something. While many of these are likely dead ends, each one must be vetted. Then there's the video footage. The RCMP has reviewed more than 8,100 individual videos from the surrounding area. This includes private dash cams, home security systems like Ring doorbells, and commercial surveillance from businesses across Pictou County and beyond. This is where the 12 search warrants come back into play. They provided the legal keys to unlock these massive data sets, allowing investigators to pore over thousands of hours of grainy footage, looking for a glimpse of a specific car, a flash of a child's jacket, or a movement that doesn't belong. This brings us to the redacted companies. Several of the search warrants were directed at entities whose names were blacked out in the unsealed documents. While we can speculate that these are telecommunications giants or internet service providers, the redaction suggests something even more sensitive. In modern investigations, police often seek data from third-party providers. Think of the apps on your phone, the GPS in your car, or even the smart devices in your home. The RCMP was digging deep into the digital infrastructure of the Sullivan Martell household. They were looking for digital breadcrumbs that aren't just found in a call log. They wanted to know if a smart speaker recorded a sound at 3 a.m., or if a fitness tracker showed a spike in heart rate during the night. The fact that these company names remain redacted indicates that the information they provided is likely still being used to build a potential criminal case. However, despite this massive influx of data, the investigation has hit a wall that has frustrated both the public and experts alike. Criminologist Michael Arfield, who has followed the case closely, offered a blunt assessment that was included in the unsealed findings. He expressed genuine surprise that the investigation has not yet turned criminal. In his professional experience, if missing individuals, especially young children, are not found within a week, the case is almost always deemed suspicious. Arfield didn't mince words, describing the RCMP's approach as novel and suggesting there might be pussyfooting around whether or not foul play is involved. This is a significant critique. It suggests a tension between the cautious, methodical approach of the RCMP and the standard operating procedure for child disappearances. Why has the RCMP stayed under the Missing Persons Act instead of declaring this a homicide or abduction investigation? The answer lies in the high bar of the Canadian justice system. Without a body, without a weapon, and without a confession, proving a crime beyond a reasonable doubt is an uphill battle. The RCMP's caution is likely a strategic choice to protect long-term justice, a phrase used by Staff Sergeant Rob McSinon. If they move too early and laid charges without a solid foundation, a skilled defense attorney could have a case thrown out, and the truth might never come to light. They are walking a razor-thin line. They need to gather enough evidence to prove a crime occurred, but they have to do it without the benefit of a traditional crime scene. This is also why the reward of $150,000 offered by the government of Nova Scotia is so important. It serves as a psychological lever. When an investigation reaches this level of complexity, and when over 86 formal interviews have been conducted with no breakthrough, the police are often waiting for one person to crack. They are waiting for the one individual who knows something, perhaps an associate of the parents or a neighbor who saw a vehicle, to decide that the money is worth more than their silence. The 7 polygraph tests, all of which were passed by people close to the children, add another layer of complexity. If the people closest to Lilly and Jack are telling the truth, then the massive scale of data, the 8,100 videos and 1,030 tips, becomes even more critical. The answer isn't a confession. It's hidden somewhere in the data, waiting for the one piece of evidence that will finally connect the Dollarama at 2:25 p.m. to the truth of what happened on Gairloch Road. The scale of the work is massive because the mystery itself is an abyss, and the RCMP is trying to fill that abyss with every scrap of information they can legally seize. In the high-stakes world of major crime investigations, few things are as polarizing or as misunderstood as the polygraph examination, the lie detector. When the documents in the Sullivan case were unsealed, they revealed a detail that seemed at first glance to vindicate the parents. Both Malehya Brooks Murray and Daniel Martell had undergone polygraph examinations, and both had been found truthful. To the general public, this sounded like the end of the story. If the parents passed the test, they must be telling the truth, right? But for the RCMP investigators and for those who understand the nuance of Canadian law, this truthfulness was not an exit ramp for the investigation. It was a complex hurdle that only deepened the mystery. To understand the weight of these results, we have to look at the specific language used by the RCMP. They didn't just say the parents passed. They stated that both were found truthful on for undisclosed questions. This is a crucial distinction. In a polygraph, the phrasing of the questions is everything. Investigators don't just ask, "Did you do it?" They craft specific, narrow queries designed to trigger physiological responses related to guilty knowledge, information that only the perpetrator of crime would know. By keeping those 4 questions sealed, even now, the RCMP is protecting the most sensitive part of their investigative strategy. If they ever need to re-interview the parents or bring in new suspects, those questions remain their ace in the hole. RCMP Corporal Charlene Curl defended the decision to keep these questions secret, noting that future polygraph tests might be necessary. In the world of forensics, a polygraph isn't a magic wand. It's a tool for measuring stress. In Canada, polygraph results are not admissible as evidence in a criminal trial precisely because they are not considered 100% reliable. They can be influenced by the subject's mental state, their belief in their own story, or even certain medications. However, they are invaluable for clearing the brush. If a person passes, it doesn't mean they are innocent in the eyes of the law. It means that at that moment, their physiological responses didn't indicate deception on those specific 4 points. But here is where the paradox lies. If Malehya and Daniel were truthful when they said the children wandered off, then where are Lilly and Jack? The RCMP had 160 searchers and drones scouring every inch of an 8.5-kilometer radius. In a typical wandered-off scenario, children, especially a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, rarely make it more than a few kilometers before being found, either alive or as part of recovery. The fact that the parents passed the polygraph but the children remain missing creates a logical void. It forces investigators to consider 2 uncomfortable possibilities. Either the polygraph was wrong, or the children vanished in a way that doesn't involve the direct, conscious knowledge of the parents during those specific 4 questions. This is why the RCMP is walking a careful line, as the documents suggest. They are dealing with a truthful set of statements that contradict the physical reality of the search. 7 people close to the children have now taken these tests, and all 7 were found truthful. This is almost unheard of in a case where foul play is suspected. Usually, a polygraph helps investigators narrow their focus by identifying who is lying. Here, it has done the opposite. It has widened the mystery. It suggests that if something happened to Lilly and Jack, it happened in a way that left no psychological fingerprint on the people closest to them, or that the event itself is so outside the box that the investigators haven't even asked the right questions yet. Staff Sergeant Rob McSinon's mention of long-term justice is the key here. The RCMP isn't just looking for the children. They're looking for a resolution that can stand up in a courtroom years from now. If they were to lean too hard on the parents after a past polygraph, a defense lawyer would claim harassment. If they ignore the parents and the truthful results, they risk missing the answer that is sitting right in front of them. The unsealed documents show that the Major Crime Unit is treating these polygraph results as just one data point in a sea of thousands. They aren't letting the truthful label stop them from executing 12 search warrants. They're looking for the objective evidence, the cell pings and bank records that will either confirm the polygraph's findings or prove that the truth is far more complicated than a machine can detect. Every investigation has a point zero, the last moment of absolute certainty before the narrative dissolves into speculation. In the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan, that point is May 1st, 2025, at 2:25 p.m. The location was the local Dollarama in New Glasgow. Thanks to the unsealed court documents, we now know that this timestamp is a Dollarama marker, the final independent verification of the children's whereabouts. This isn't just a trivial detail. It is the anchor upon which the entire RCMP investigation is built. Everything that happened before 2:25 p.m. is a matter of public record and video evidence. Everything that happened after is a matter of family testimony. The surveillance footage from that Dollarama reportedly shows the entire family unit. Daniel Martell, Malehya Brooks Murray, their 1-year-old daughter Meadow, and the 2 children who had vanished less than 20 hours later, Lilly and Jack. In the video, they appear to be a normal family running a mundane errand. There are no signs of distress, no frantic behavior, and the children appear healthy. This is why this footage is so haunting for investigators. It captures the last seconds of a normal life, but more importantly, it sets a hard boundary for the police. They know exactly where the children were at 2:25 p.m. Their mission for the last 8 months has been to account for every second of the 1,200 minutes that followed. The significance of the Dollarama marker cannot be overstated. When the RCMP executed their 12 search warrants, they were specifically looking for data that could bridge the gap between that store in New Glasgow and the 9/11 call from Gairloch Road the next morning. If the family says they went straight home, the investigators want to see the car on highway cameras. If the family says the kids were playing in the yard that evening, the investigators want to see a neighbor's dash cam or school bus video that confirms it. The problem revealed by the unsealed documents is that, so far, there's a total lack of independent confirmation during those 20 hours. No one else saw them. No other camera caught them. For nearly a full day, Lilly and Jack Sullivan existed in a vacuum. This gray window is where the investigation has stalled. The RCMP's emphasis on the Dollarama footage as the last independent verification is a subtle but powerful signal. In the language of major crime investigators, independent verification is the only currency that matters. Statements from family members, while valuable, are considered subjective. They can be skewed by trauma, memory lapses, or, in the worst-case scenario, intentional deception. By highlighting the Dollarama marker, the RCMP is admitting that they have been unable to find a single person or a single camera that can prove the children were alive after they left that store. This brings a chilling perspective to the wandered-off theory. If the children wandered off at 10 a.m. on May 2nd, but the last time a stranger saw them was 2:25 p.m. the day before, investigators have to ask, did they ever actually make it back to the house? Or did something happen on the drive home? Did something happen during the night? This is why the warrants for cell phone location data and bank records were so vital. The RCMP was trying to use digital forensics to reconstruct a physical presence that no human eye could verify. They were looking for a digital shadow of the children, a sound on a phone recording, a movement captured by a smart device, or a transaction that suggested they were still with their parents. The Dollarama marker also explains the RCMP's interest in the highway surveillance. If you leave the Dollarama in New Glasgow and head toward Lansdowne Station, there are only so many routes you can take. By analyzing every camera along those routes, the police were trying to confirm the family's arrival at home. If the car was seen heading away from the house, or if the car didn't reappear on cameras where it should have, the timeline provided by the parents will fall apart. The unsealed documents reveal that the RCMP has been obsessed with this timeline, reviewing over 8,100 videos just to find one more second of independent verification. As of January 2026, they are still looking. The Dollarama video remains a lonely island of certainty in a sea of unanswered questions. It is the last time the world saw Lilly and Jack, and until the RCMP can find the next marker, the 20 hours that follow will remain the dark heart of this case. While the RCMP continues its methodical march through data and digital forensics, the human element of the Sullivan case has begun to splinter under the immense pressure of 8 months of uncertainty. When the documents were unsealed in January 2026, they didn't just provide a window into the police's work. They exposed the raw, bleeding edges of family in crisis and a system under intense scrutiny. At the center of this emotional storm is Belinda Gray, the paternal grandmother of Lilly and Jack. Her voice has become one of the most prominent and piercing in the quest for answers, and her perspective offers a stark contrast to the clinical, redacted language of the court warrants. Belinda Gray has not been content to wait for the RCMP's methodical approach to yield results. In the months leading up to the unsealing of the documents, she has been vocal in her dissatisfaction, calling for a full public inquiry into the disappearance of her grandchildren. But her calls for an inquiry go beyond the police investigation itself. She has pointed a finger at a specific, often shadowy part of provincial infrastructure: Child Protective Services. The unsealed documents hint at why this might be a point of such intense focus. In any investigation involving the disappearance of young children from a home, the history of that household becomes a primary line of inquiry. Were there previous reports? Had the system interacted with Malehya Brooks Murray or Daniel Martell before May 2nd? The mention of Child Protective Services in the context of a missing persons case add a layer of systemic complexity that the RCMP rarely discusses in public. If there was prior involvement, it raises uncomfortable questions about whether the disappearance could have been prevented. Belinda Gray's demand for transparency isn't just about finding the children. It's about holding the system accountable for the environment they were in. The unsealed warrants, with their redactions and privileged information, do not yet answer whether CPS had an open file on the family, but the very fact that this is a public point of contention suggests that the wandered-off narrative is being challenged by those who knew the family best. This internal family tension creates a bifurcated reality. On one side, you have the mother and her partner, who have passed polygraph tests and maintained their story of a tragic accident. On the other, you have a paternal family searching for a different kind of truth, one that involves an investigation into the household's history. This fracture is where the truth often hides in complex cases. When a family is no longer a united front, the police can use that friction to gather information. Every interview conducted, and there have been 86 formal ones so far, likely taps into these existing tensions, looking for the one person who is willing to break ranks. Then there is the matter of the $150,000 reward offered by the government of Nova Scotia. This is a significant sum of money, especially in a rural community. In the world of criminology, a reward of this size is a psychological weapon. It is designed to create a prisoner's dilemma among anyone who might have knowledge of the children's whereabouts. If someone helped move the children, or if someone knows exactly what happened in the woods of Gairloch Road, that $150,000 is a constant, nagging temptation. The fact that the reward remains unclaimed after 8 months is both baffling and telling. It suggests one of two things. Either no one outside the immediate household knows anything, or the fear of coming forward, or the loyalty to those involved, is stronger than the life-changing pull of $150,000. Belinda Gray's public stance has ensured that Lilly and Jack remain more than just names on a warrant. She has pushed the narrative into the realm of public accountability, forcing the RCMP and the provincial government to reckon with the optics of the case. For Gray, the 12-search warrant are proof that the police shared her suspicions, even if they wouldn't admit it to her face. The unsealed documents have validated her feeling that this was never a simple case of children getting lost in the woods. They have shown that while she was grieving and demanding answers, the major crime unit was quietly digging into the very thing she suspected: the communications, the finances, and the movement of the adults in that home. As we move further into 2026, the pressure from the family and the public for a full inquiry only grows, turning the Sullivan case into a trial of the system itself. As the investigation into the disappearance of Lilly and Jack Sullivan enters its 9th month, it has become a case study in the evolution of modern Canadian policing. However, not everyone is impressed by the RCMP's methodical approach. Among the most vocal critics is criminologist Michael Arfield, whose assessment of the case was a highlight of the media's analysis following the unsealing of the court documents. Arfield's critique hits at the very heart of the public's frustration. He didn't just call the investigation slow. He used a term that resonated with many. He described the RCMP as pussyfooting around the question of foul play. To Arfield, and to many experts in child disappearance cases, the Sullivan investigation is novel, and not necessarily in a good way. In almost every other high-profile missing child case in North America, the transition from a missing person search to a criminal investigation happens within days, if not hours. When children as young as 3 and 5 vanish without a single footprint, a single scrap of clothing, or a single scent trail for cadaver dogs, the working hypothesis almost always shifts to foul play immediately. Yet, the RCMP has steadfastly refused to reclassify the case. They continue to operate under the Missing Persons Act, even while executing warrants that are clearly designed to uncover criminal activity. This brings us to a fundamental question of law: the burden of proof. Why hasn't the case turned criminal? Chief Superintendent Dan Maroro, a veteran with 33 years in policing, provided a rare glimpse into the RCMP's mindset. He described the case as extremely rare and noted that in over 3 decades, he has never seen anything quite like it. But his explanation for the delay was rooted in the clinical necessity of a methodical approach. In Canada, if you want to charge someone with crime without a body, a no-body homicide, your evidence must be ironclad. You aren't just proving crime. You're proving the absence of any other possibility.